Welcome, everyone, both here and at home, to tonight's program, Beyond the Politics of Contempt. My name is Mike Morris, and I'm a librarian here at Howe Library. I'm joined this evening by my colleague, Megan Coleman, who will be assisting me tonight in the back with Zoom. Before we start the program, I have just a couple of things to note. First off, tonight's program is being recorded. For those attending here in person, I want to mention that the microphones that are mounted above you are very sensitive to sound. So if you're whispering to your neighbor, we might not all be able to hear it, but the folks at home might. For the folks at home, we ask that you keep yourself muted during the presentation. And if you have any questions for our speakers, that you put those in the chat on Zoom, and we will relay them to the presenters as soon as we can. So now we are thrilled to have with us today two individuals who've written a new book on a very important and timely topic. We have Beth Malow. She is a neurosurgeon and science/health communicator working in public health and climate change. She's given a TEDx talk, The Art of Communicating Science. She moderates workshops and debates for Braver Angels, the bipartisan nonprofit grassroots organization focused on uniting Americans in our divided time. She's appeared on NPR, 1A, and the PBS Newshour. And then we have also Doug Teschner, who ran the Peace Corps in Ukraine and led the community education effort to end the Ebola epidemic in Guinea. As Braver Angels New England regional leader, he led the effort to the creation of a bipartisan caucus in the New Hampshire House of Representatives, where he previously served as a GOP legislator. Both are residents of the Upper Valley here of Vermont, New Hampshire. Beth and Doug are the co-authors of Beyond the Politics of Contempt, Practical Steps to Build Positive Relationships in Divided Times. Won't you welcome, please, Beth Malow and Doug Teschner.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone who's on Zoom. I want to try to remember, this is our first hybrid where we've been on Zoom and we've been in person. We've never done both at the same time. So one of the things I really want to try to remember is that we want to recognize our friends on Zoom. And I'm so grateful to you, Mike. And is it Megan? Megan, thank you, Megan, for watching the Zoom and the computer and making sure that everyone is taken great care of. So we wanted to start by talking about our book for a few minutes. We'll probably spend about 30 minutes asking each other some general questions, and then we'll have about 30 minutes of Q&A. And if you're in the room, you can just raise your hand. If you're on Zoom, you can put something in the chat, and Megan and Mike will relay it to us. And then afterward, for those in the room, we've got some books, bookmarks. We're happy to continue the conversation for a few minutes. You can purchase, and we can sign some books. And we also wanted to make everyone aware of a few other things along the way. We have an audiobook coming out in early May. If you're an audiobook kind of a listener, we have a Kindle on Amazon, and our books for those local are also available if you want to support your local bookstores. Still North has our book, also the Norwich bookstore and the Yankee bookshop in Woodstock. Okay. So we're going to start out. Doug, do you want to do a reading first?
Thank you, and thank you all, and delighted to be here. And this is a reading from the introduction to the book. One Saturday, I drove 40 miles north to Woodsville, New Hampshire, to attend the wake of a 95-year-old farmer. His antique tractor was idling outside the funeral home, bringing joy to those gathered. I had known this man, who always had a smile on his face, and his son and grandchildren when I lived for 36 years in nearby Pike. Both Pike and Woodsville are villages in the town of Howe that I represented in the state legislature more than 20 years ago. With a population of 4,600, Haverhill is wedged between the Connecticut River and the White Mountains and has a rich agricultural heritage. When I first moved there in the 1980s, It was the largest dairy producing town in New Hampshire. While many fields are still mowed for hay, family farms are largely gone as the economies of agriculture have changed dramatically in recent years. While celebrating that heritage and the beautiful scenery on my drive, I also felt a deep sadness for current and future generations who won't have the opportunity to make a living off the land and experience the lifestyle and pride that go with it. It's also hard not to notice boarded up businesses and homes needing repair. I contrast Haverhill with Lebanon, New Hampshire, where my wife and I moved in 2023 to be closer to our son and grandson. This small city, population 15,000, has a major medical center, prosperous manufacturing businesses, and Dartmouth College in nearby Hanover. There are many jobs, good jobs in Lebanon and Hanover, but most people from Haverhill and other towns cannot afford the high-priced housing, so they get by with longer commutes. According to New Hampshire Employment Security, Haverhill's 2022 median household income was $59,000, with 10% below the poverty line and 18.5% of adults aged 25 and up with bachelor's degrees or higher. That compares to Lebanon, with a $91,000 median household income, 8.4% below the poverty line, and 55.8% with college degrees. In the 2024 presidential election, Haverhill voters went 60% for Donald Trump and 39% for Kamala Harris, while Lebanon voted 25% for Trump and 74% for Harris. Two communities so close but so different. This is a microcosm of the National Geographic siloing trend, where people tend to live and primarily interact with others who have the same ideas about politics. I'm sure there are some in prosperous communities like Lebanon who don't think of people in Haverhill as backward rural people who aren't educated or smart enough to know how to vote in a way that best meets their needs. And there are rural folks from places like Haverhill who view people in Lebanon as elitists who look down at working class people. Having lived in Haverhill and Lebanon, I know there are many caring, thoughtful people in both. Sadly, there aren't enough opportunities for people to get to know those from different communities. People easily fall into stereotyping and oversimplification. If we're going to get past this country's division, we need to find ways to facilitate connections so that people better understand those with different life experiences and perspectives.
Thank you, Doug. Doug, can you tell me or tell the audience why you decided to write this book, Beyond the Politics of Contempt?
Well, like it was said, I was in the legislature back in the I started in '88, but back really in mostly in the 1990s. And I began to see a decline in how people interacted with each other in politics, and it really sort of took off. It went later, and I went overseas. I took my family over to I was in Rwanda and Morocco, and then I was Peace Corps country director in Ukraine and several African countries. And I came back and I was following the news, and the inability of people to communicate with each other and the nastiness had really taken off. And I got involved with a group called Braver Angels, a national organization that was founded in 2016. Beth and I are both involved. And ironically, I got involved through, well, I would say ironically, but I got involved through my friend, with her friend, Peter Yarrow, Peter Paul and Mary, who I met in Ukraine. I got to know him quite well. And in 2019, he gave a concert at the Lebanon Opera House. Some of you might have even been there. And afterwards, I went up to him and Peter said, I got to tell you about this group. It was called Better Angels, and it's now called Braver Angels. And I was looking for a way to contribute, and I got involved. I now have this fancy title, New England Regional Leader, very fancy title for a volunteer. But I wanted to do more, and I got a New Year's resolution in 2024 to step up and write this book. Having no idea what I was really getting into, I thought it would be a 6-month project, and I would attract a publisher, and I could talk more about that. But from early on, I wanted to have other partners with me. And Beth, maybe you could talk about how you got involved.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I think we really wanted to write this book because we wanted to give people a sense of hope in these divided times. And also, it could be just figuring out how to get along with your relatives, right? How many of you, I can only probably ask the people in the audience here, but how many of you have struggled with friends or relatives divided by politics? Yeah. Well, yes, it's very common. And that's one of the things that really appealed to me about working with Doug. And I thought this is a great project to get involved with. So when he asked me to read a few chapters, I moved up here from Nashville, Tennessee to Quechee, Vermont in about 2 years ago. And I read some of his chapters. And one day he said, "Hey, would you like to be my co-author?" And I said, "Absolutely." I didn't think long about it because I was so excited about it. I realize now it's been a lot of work, but it's been so rewarding. And one of the things that I think is really great about our partnership is, I mean, not only are we different genders, we're religion. I'm Jewish. Doug is Christian. We're living in different parts of the Upper Valley. I know there's, I guess, a little bit of a rivalry, right, between New Hampshire and Vermont. So I'm happy to
Live free guy. That's
and we're what, freedom and unity. So we got the best of both. And it's been really a wonderful partnership. So what I'd like to do at this point, for those on chat, we're going to put a couple of things in the chat. One is the website for our book, beyondthepoliticsofcontempt.com. Megan's going to put that in the chat. And then we also have this free newsletter called Substack that is togethernow.substack.com. The people in the audience live here, we have bookmarks and other things at the end. If you want those links, they're on those. And I just wanted to mention where as Doug mentioned, it's been a little challenging these days publishing. We wanted to get our book out in the world because so many people needed it. And we self-published. And fortunately, our third author, Becky Robinson, who lives in Michigan, otherwise she'd be with us here today, she has worked in book publishing. She has worked in book marketing, and she really was a powerhouse in helping us get our book out in the world, getting the beautiful cover. I'm excited about having learned how to self-publish. I'm happy to take any questions on that as well. I'm going to be at the Bookstock in Woodstock, Vermont, the Bookstock Festival in May, and I'm doing a master class on self-publishing. So anyone who's local and wants to attend that, we'd love to have you there. We'll have a booth as well. And we've gotten more than 1,000 books out in the world. Our Substack, which features some of the themes from our book, has more than 1,200 subscribers. And we've been really blessed to win a book award called Literary Titan. So I just wanted to make sure people had access to that. And then, Doug, do you want to add anything about the why, the what's going on? I mean, I mentioned the feeling of finding meaning in these divided times, being able to mend relationships with relatives. Do you have anything else?
Sure. Through our work with Braver Angels and also thinking about writing this book, we wanted to attract people who are concerned about our country. But as we were writing, we got some more ideas. For one thing, we want to give people hope. I mean, I think people are feeling a lot of unrest in their own lives about our own country, and we wanted to give people action steps, things they can do to feel better, to even small things you can do that would make you feel better and give yourself a little hope in these divided times. We also so some of it's a mental health process of how can I feel better right now, knowing that I'm seeing these kind of divisions in the country. Also, we wanted to, as was mentioned, about how do we work through relationships. how do we help manage relationships? And some of these are not easy. I have some difficult ones that I'm dealing with in my own family. But there are some very practical things you can do. And by the way, a lot of we mentioned that we're both involved with this group, Braver Angels. We'd encourage you to check out their website at braverangels.org. And there are free workshops. And one of my favorites called Families in Politics is exactly the kind of thing we're talking about. And some of the ideas that are in that workshop are also included in our book. And they were developed by a guy named Bill Doherty, who's a professor of marriage and family counseling in Minnesota. He's one of the founding members of Braver Angels, and he developed a lot of the workshops and the ideas about how we can help people to talk to each other. And we also got into how do you address community challenges, community problems? What are there's issues in your community? Like I know it's in Hammer right now. There's a pretty hot issue about the parking situation. For instance, I've been following on the Valley News. And how would you address that? And maybe Hanover is not a good example because it's not very diverse politically. But still, how can you bring people together to address a problem, even if it's where people might have differences of opinions? So we have a lot about those kind of tips in our book. And the last thing I'll mention, or maybe you want to talk about it, is being an activist. And this is something we got into. We were approached by a group called Public Citizen, which is one of the organizers of the what was it?
Indivisible.
Indivisible. I was wondering if it was actually before No Kings, or if that was before the first No Kings rally. But they asked us to come and talk about how to have conversations with people you disagree with, and we went on a Zoom call. There were 700 people on that Zoom call from across the country, and we gave some suggestions, and people were pretty interested. And as we were writing the book, I said, we got to talk more about that. That we're not saying you can't stand up for what you believe and be an activist, but how can you do it and be a bridge builder? Maybe you can.
Yeah, I would love to address that, and then I'll address some of the practical steps that we talk about in our book. So, yeah, the best thing I can do is tell a story. Early on, about a month after we published our book, I was in Nashville because I'm from there. I lived there for 21 years. I directed the sleep center at Vanderbilt. I still work remotely for the university. And I went back to exhibit at a book festival there. And there was a No Kings rally going on the same day, same morning. And of course, my initial thought is parking, right? Where am I going to park? It's going to be a mob scene. What am I going to do? And yet it was such a positive experience because so many people came by the booth and they were so energetic and they were so interested in what we were doing. And I somehow didn't have that feeling like they would be. I guess I just thought they'd think, well, we're activists and they're trying to bridge divides and build bridges. And yet what I found from the ralliers, protesters, was that they really wanted to figure out how to get along. There were these two women, and one of them was like, let's keep moving. And the other one was like, no, I want to look at that book. I'm not able to talk to my sister. I haven't talked to my sister, right? You're smiling, in years. And we've been divided by politics. And she came up and she looked through the book and she says, I've got to buy this book. Now, I wasn't there, and I'm not relaying this story because she wanted to buy her book. I'm happy she wanted to buy her book, but it made me realize that there's a real yearning and thirst for people, even if you're working really, really hard to be an activist and whatever form that takes. You can be a bridge builder too, or you could respect bridge builders the same way that I respect the work that the activists are doing. So I think that the two are compatible. And I was asked to speak to Indivisible this Saturday in Brattleboro. I'm very proud of it, and I'm really eager to go and try to help them with similar issues related to relationships. I also feel that one of the things, I told you a little story. One of the things that's unique about our book, there are a lot of books out there right now about our democracy. And I think there's two big things that are unique about our book. One is that we have stories. We were told early on, people really want to hear your personal stories. And boy, do we have stories. I have stories from being in Tennessee and moving to Vermont and being a Democrat. Doug has stories being on the other side of the aisle and his upbringing. And then Becky has stories. And we really try to convey our personal stories in the book. And then the second thing that I think is pretty unique about our book is that we really do try to come up with practical steps. It's not just doom and gloom. We really want to give people hope and ideas. So some of the things I just wanted to highlight, and we can address these more in the questions. One is awareness of forces out there that may be dividing us, like we call them conflict entrepreneurs. We have a little image in the book of a crocodile, a slide crocodile who's about to chomp on the American flag. And the idea that we're better than this. And people, forces, whether they be dark money in politics, or they be foreign entities, or they even be not all of the media, but some of the media out there, some of the news media, some of social media, really wants to divide us because that's how they get more clicks and that's how they get more money. You have a slogan, let me get it right, if it's
well, it's a quote we have in the book that I came up with. If it screams, it streams. If it's kind, pay no mind.
Right.
And this is kind of how the media is working, how the social media is working, how book promotion is working. If you're screaming, it's a lot easier to sell a book than it is the kind of stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
And this is the reality of these conflict entrepreneurs, this environment where there are a lot of people who are making money and profiting in different ways from trying to divide us.
Absolutely.
And so part of this is that, let me understand how this is working. The self-awareness that goes with this that we talk a lot about in the book.
Yeah, and we go deeper into values and all, but yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head, Doug. And then the second area are our bubbles. And Doug's reading of the behavioral story and contrasting it with Lebanon is, I think, a great example. One of the things I miss about Tennessee, I sang in a chorus, and there were people of all different races, ethnicities, as well as political persuasions. And I think that was really healthy for me. I was constantly coming into that even in my clinic. I had one guy in my clinic, and he was a CPAP user, and we would do the visit, right, for sleep apnea, because I'm a sleep doctor. And once we were done with the visit, I didn't charge him for this, but after we did our work together, we would talk about political books, and he was a conservative, and I respected him a great deal. And those are the kinds of things that I really appreciated about living in a red state, even though I'm Democrat and I'm blue, is not being in a bubble, because then I got different ideas about how things worked. And I think we need that. We need to figure out ways that we can interact with other people who are different than us. And then the other is just practical conversational skills. When you talk with somebody who might feel differently than you on a specific issue, whether it be the parking or whether it be something like abortion or climate change or whatever, how do you do it? How do you do it in a way that's effective, that's respectful, where the person might not change their mind, but they leave the conversation saying, Beth got it. I respect her. I felt heard. I think that's super important. And that's one of the things that I've learned as a Braver Angels moderator, because I teach people in workshops those skills. And we have a couple of little cards on Braver Angels, and Megan will put in the chat the braverangels.org. They have free workshops and local as well as online. We have a kind of a budding alliance, as we call it, in the Upper Valley here. And we bring some of those skills and those conversational techniques to the book. And then those are probably the three key things I wanted to mention. Doug also mentioned the working on local issues and local problems. And I think that's a great way to get to meet more people who are more diverse, both politically as well as, let's say, racially, ethnically, different religions. So I wanted to make sure we also put in the chat for those online. Yes, I think it was just I think it's the links that we already did.
I want to share one story. We were at a Braver Angel meeting down in New York City, and it was the first time actually the three authors had been together doing an event. It was kind of special. But a woman stepped up and said, I run a business and I have a lot of clients, and people start talking about politics, and they often assume that I agree with them. And I just try to keep my mouth shut, which I describe it as the elephant in the room or the donkey in the room. This is the truth. This is sort of a reality about a lot of situations or workplace violence. There's this elephant in the room that's keeping everybody kind of tense. But anyway, she went on and said, every once in a while, I slip and my politics come out, and if they don't agree with me, they get really upset. What can I do? Well, in the book, we go into a lot of more details about having those difficult conversations. But we talked about a few things, and I said, well, one thing you can do is you can say, I just want you to know that my relationship with you is really important to me. And I feel it's more important than politics. And she came up to us after the talk, and she was all excited to sort of, okay, that's something I can say, that's something I can do. And a simple step like that. And we'd love to follow up with her and find out how it's going. But and things don't always work that well. I mean, we have a lot of ideas about how to do it, but this is hard work. These are hard conversations. But I felt that hope in her. I could see her being distressed, and then we had this conversation, and she was feeling some hope. And those are really kind of what we're trying to bring with this book and the work we're doing with Braver Angels.
We like to talk. That's a beautiful story, Doug. What we like to tell people or share with people or relate is that there's all different levels. I mean, it may be just enough to get back together with your sister who you haven't talked to in years and discuss not politics, but something else. But know that, you believe that in their heart, in your heart, they're a good person. Or you might be able to say, well, we have similar values. Like during COVID, I like to give the example of communities that wanted to eradicate every case, but then there were other communities that said we want to keep our schools open and our businesses open, and we have a very low level. So let's try to do that. And they were all valuing the health of their community, right, in different ways. So you can sometimes find values in common around kids, around anything with others we disagree with. And then I also wanted to say there's one more chat to put in the togethernow.substack.com with the P. I wanted to mention this outrage. Outrage is good to an extent. Outrage and being really angry can really motivate us. And I think in some ways it's a very powerful force. Sometimes, though, as you mentioned with the mental health, you get so upset and worked up about outrage, that it can work against us. And what I write about in the Substack is how I channel my outrage into action. So it's a small little story, and it's about, for example, as a doctor and a public health person and a climate change advocate, I was beyond upset about the EPA's recent saying that carbon emissions and carbon pollution does not cause health issues, because I know that it does. And I talk about brain health, living near freeways, and how that can increase dementia and stroke. So I was beyond upset. And yet what I did was, after I was outraged for a while and listening to the TV and the New York Times and everything, I remembered that there is a lot of strength in numbers. So I got together with some of my friends who are doing climate change advocacy, and we were able to make a difference. And I remembered the lobbying we've done with our elected officials. Even when I was in Tennessee, we did that. I remembered speaking at national meetings on how climate change is truly in our lane. And that really gave me a lot of hope. So we talk a lot in the book, and even more so in our Substacks, about, this kind of goes back to the activism and bridge building and how I think you can integrate both. At this point, it's about 7:00. We would love to open up to you all, including on the Zoom. You can put something in the chat, and Megan and Mike will relay it to us. We are open to any questions you have. And I just want to say, this is absolutely our most favorite part when we speak, because we always learn something new, don't we, Doug? We never leave without saying, wow, that was a perceptive question, usually several questions. And just, it makes us think more, and it hones our presentation. So please don't hold back. We really want to hear what's on your mind, and do our best to answer them.
Yeah, and I just add that, we have the book. The book was published on September 9th. So the book doesn't change, other than a few typos we found. This is really the dynamic aspect of the Substack, is we're responding to events. We have guest posts. Someone I know is on the chat who's written about Lincoln, and he's done some guest posts. Duncan Newcomer's done some guest posts for us, and other people have. And as current events come up, or we have new ideas, like she mentioned, that reacting to the EPA. And I was thinking about my church, who we have a member here, and there was a wonderful watchwords that we've done where people can pick a Bible passage out of a hat and then write about it, and some wonderful ideas that people had, and I've learned a lot reading other people's what other people have written too, and I was somewhat inspired actually by the Substack to write my last one of my recent Substack posts called and I wrote about love your enemies. Jesus said to love your enemies. What does that mean? And is that possible? And so we're trying with the Substack. We're just kind of upgrading our ideas and looking for other people to contribute, and it's been a wonderful process to in addition to the book.
Thank you.
So check it out. It's free. I mean, yes, you can if you want to donate, and people have donated and helped with the production of the book. It's been wonderful. But if people are interested, you want to sign up for free, we're delighted to have you free. There are 1,200 people that are signed up on our Substack.
Yeah. Yes. Why don't we
for
start?
people in my generation, would you tell us how we find our way to a Substack?
Yeah.
Yes.
That is my
Do you want me to handle that one?
Sure.
All you have to do is put it in your choice of websites, Google, whatever, your web browser. So do you know what I mean by a web browser? Okay.
Yeah.
And we have for you a bookmark, and it actually has the Substack on it, and we'll go over that at the end. But great question. And Thank you. And you can subscribe, as Doug said, for free, and you can even comment on articles and share them with people. Thank you.
Now, you will be asked to sign up for other people's Substacks, and you have to manage that sometimes if you want to figure out how you can manage it. But there's a lot of resources on there that are pretty interesting, and we don't want to overload our emails. But I've had a wonderful interactions with at least one of the people in the church who's been on our Substack, and she makes comments or they hit likes, and it's a kind of a community of
It is a
a
community.
connection that's we find it very special that we didn't really know that much about it either. But Becky had recommended it. She has a book production business, Weaving Influence, our third author, and that was one of her suggestions, and that's been a really powerful idea for us because we're not trying to make money off a book. We're trying to promote ideas, and we're trying not to lose money, although we have put a little money. We both put a little money into it, but it's really for us about communicating with people, engaging with people, learning from other people, and that sort of thing.
That's been so rewarding. You had a question.
Yeah, I had a similar question to Kathleen. I really didn't understand, and I still don't really understand what Substack is all about.
Right. It's two different things. It's a website where you can go and get a newsletter every week or whenever it's published, sent to you, and there are thousands of authors. It also could be social media. For example, the idea that you can chat and you can send people messages and all of that, but you don't have to. I have friends who enjoy getting our newsletter and don't really want to be in the social media space, and that's okay too. You don't have to do that. So it's really whatever you want it to be. But for us, it's been nice because let's say in the old days, you would have to have a list of everybody who got your newsletter, and then you'd have to type them all in. The Substack does it for us. And then people can, as I said, or Doug said, chat with each other.
And they can unsubscribe,
Yeah.
and you might end up with be a little surprised that a couple other emails show up in your box, and if you don't like them, you unsubscribe.
Right.
I mean, because Substack is trying to, they're promoting everybody, and they're trying to push you into paid. And some depending on the author, some do require paid, but we do not. You do not have to pay.
Okay,
Yeah, it's free.
thank you.
Other questions? You have a question, Mike?
Yes, this is from Kate online.
Okay.
She said, I had a political disagreement with a childhood friend, and after some emails back and forth, I decided the relationship was not more important than our disagreements. Any advice?
Yes. So the first advice, did everyone hear everyone would have heard the question? Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind, and I used to not feel this way. I used to feel like you have to figure out a way to get together with that person, right? For some reason, and I don't know why it is, maybe this is why I do this work. I relish conversations that are challenging with people who are different than me. I just do. And I don't say that out of pride or whatever. I say that because I just am. I realize that everybody has to find their place, and there may truly be a situation, right? We hope it's rare, but there may be a situation where you have to set up boundaries and you just can't talk to that person for whatever reason. I hope that for the most part, it's more of what Doug talked about with his advice to the person we met in New York City. I hope that it's more of a, well, I value you. I value you as a friend. Let's not talk about politics. Let's steer away from that. But it may be that they always want to bring it up or whatever. So, I think there's different levels. What I would probably say is if you feel like there's at least that ability to open the door and you care about this person, or at one point you did care about them, start out by just taking Doug's approach and just, I value our relationship. Can we agree to just talk about other things, at least for a while? Build your relationship back. I mean, I'm thinking about some friends I had in Tennessee and how when I first got to know them, I didn't talk about politics with them. We talked about whatever we were doing, whether it was singing or gardening or whatever. And then over time, when I felt like they trusted me and I trusted them, we could talk about politics. So even me, who relishes this, started out there. But I do respect that there may be people who you just feel like there's a line with and a boundary with. And I think boundaries are sometimes healthy. But I hope that there's at least that little door that you can open a little bit.
Relationships come and go in life. We all know that. But what's sad, what I find very sad is that when did politics become more important than relationships or more important than family? And there's so many dimensions of our lives, hobbies, work, children, family, being part of the Upper Valley here where we live, being part of the Rotary Club or being part of the church. There's so many dimensions to our lives. And it's really troubling that politics has sort of become, for many people, like the overriding dimension of anything else. You could have a lot of other things you have in common, especially if you have history, people that have history of friendships, and to lose that over our politics is very sad. So what are other dimensions of relationships? But I mean, I think you have to evaluate as we all go through life with relationships, which ones are, which sometimes you have to let some go for one reason or another. And if someone in particular is sort of, I hate to use the word obsessed, but with politics, I can understand that. But, there's some really interesting data. There's a question asked of people, would you mind if your child married someone from the other political party? And it used to be like 4% of adults thought that. Well, now it's much, much higher. And I should pull up the data when we're doing these talks. But so politics is somehow it has sort of become such a dominant force in our lives, and I find that sad. And to what extent can you talk about other things?
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Other questions on the chat or in the room?
Let's see. We have a comment. Not a question, she says, but there's definitely a lot of hope and grace, the grace to love others while hopeful to work for better communication and understanding.
Thank you.
And also Julianne from Southeast Pennsylvania, Brave Angel says hello.
Wonderful.
It's the word grace, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a wonderful word. Like one thing we do talk about in our book is we think it's really important for people to spend some time thinking about their values. What are their most important values? And other authors like Brene Brown have talked about this. Brene Brown has a list. I believe you can get online if you don't want to read a book. Of she's got 100 values, and which are your top two? She suggests two, but you can get it down to 5 or 6 or 8. And we all write about this in the book. And my top 2 values are growing and grace. I say growing with grace, because growing to me is trying to be improving all the time. And grace, I think, embraces, and I love that comment, embraces sort of my Christian tradition and how you want to approach people with humility and be open to people. So but when you stop and look at your values, we encourage people to think about if people have strong political convictions, can they look at their values in ways that to think about people who have different political convictions. I think sometimes people talk about their values, but they only address them toward their side and not to the other side. And I think that's a little bit of a challenge to say, well, wait a minute, am I really living up to my values when I talk to people who might have different political views than I do? And not to say that people can't be very unpleasant, but what's important, what's in your heart, looking within yourself and approaching this kind of work, I think is, and in life, approaching life is really important.
Mine were diplomacy and authenticity, which seem a little bit like contradictory in a way, because if you're fully authentic, you shouldn't have to be diplomatic. You can just be authentic. But I found that I'm more apt to be able to speak my mind if I can do it in a way that's inclusive and brings people in. And I've learned it's a skill. It's really listening, and it's taking the time to listen to others. And communication is a two-way street. So before I tell somebody what I think about a certain hot topic, I really want to understand where they're coming from. And that really helps me. And it helps me, first of all, if I really want to be convincing, let's say about climate, I want to understand where the holes are in my thinking so that I can address them. And then and then sometimes they might change my mind on a certain issue. I might find myself moving more to the middle from the left to the middle, like on abortion. I mean, there's all sorts of different things that we learn from our conversations. And I think that is a very important part of the book that Doug really spearheaded, is the really getting in touch with your values and how they might relate to what we're feeling right now in these political times. More questions?
I just speak a little bit to the authenticity, and that's high on my list too. It's in my top 10. But I think people think of authenticity as just speaking your mind. I don't think that's what we mean by authenticity. We mean understanding where you come from. What do you believe? It's more of an internal. Authenticity is more of an internal, look than an outward look, an inward look. And I'd also add the word humility to the conversation, which seems to be really lacking in these times. I mean, I think it's an important part of that grace that I mentioned. We seem to have lost that humility. And I worry about our children. What are we teaching our children when we're not showing dignity and respect, which is really the core idea in our book. We haven't used that word up till now, but really the core idea is how treating other people with dignity and respect. When we don't treat other people with dignity and respect, when it's okay because they have a different politics to not treat those people with dignity and respect. What are we teaching our children? I really worry about that.
And another word is curiosity.
Yes.
Since we're coming up with words, thanks for clarifying the authenticity. I think curiosity is critical. Like being really curious. I gave a TED talk a few years ago, and in the talk I said, "Be curious, not furious." And that was the line everybody seemed to remember. And it's really true. I think that you need to try to cultivate curiosity about other people and their opinions. Other questions in the room or on the chat that we have?
I have one.
Oh, great.
That, hearing Doug talk about, people up in Haverhill and people in Lebanon and how important these conversations are. But how do you get yourself in a place where you're going to interface with people who disagree with you? Oh, we're in our bubbles. So do you have any advice for how to get out?
Well, that's
kind of
great.
Physically sometimes get outside of that bubble into other ones?
Well, one of the challenges and one of the factors that's driving this is the lack of social capital. And I'm familiar with Robert Putnam, who's a New Hampshire resident, and he's written a famous book called Bowling Alone, as well as a follow-up book called The
Upswing.
The Upswing. Thank
Yeah.
you. And one of the challenges I think is that we don't interact with people outside our bubble. So people maybe would be in a Rotary Club or a garden club or a church or other kind of organizations. And that's one of the ways we think about, approaching a challenge in the community. Can you find other people who want to approach a challenge in the community? Well, maybe you're going to have a different, you don't know where they're coming from exactly, but find people who you see a letter to the editor and say, oh, I can look up that person. It's not as easy as it is now. And I think people are very tied to their jobs, and there's a lot of stress around. All right, you've got obviously you need two full-time incomes just to support housing in this day and age, and for young people, it's I think it's very challenging the way we're operating. But you create opportunities where you get to know your kids. The parents at the baseball game, just sort of, tell me about yourself. And we were talking earlier about being in the line, picking up the kids at school, and I did have a conversation with a guy today we started talking about each other's lives, but I think we could do more in that. When we're in the grocery line, oh, where do you live? And we're all frustrated standing in the grocery line. But what are opportunities to just get to know each other? And we don't have to talk about politics. Talk to, where do you work? Where'd you grow up? Where did you, do you have any hobbies? Things, and then maybe we'll get to politics, but just to get to know people and in ways that that show interest. And we sort of concluded our book with sort of, meeting someone from the other political party. We were thinking about a No Kings rally or some kind of event where somebody's holding a sign for the other candidate. Would it be possible to walk over to them and have a conversation and say, oh, where do you live? It's not, you're not challenging them on their politics, but and I was interested, by the way, in the Valley News, the local paper here. I was reading about the No Kings rallies, and there was a Trump supporter who was at the No Kings rally, and he I think it was Lebanon Green, and he was carrying a sign, and they were asking him, well, did he get any reaction? He said, yeah, somebody yelled at me, but it sounded like he might, maybe, I would like to know more. Maybe he has positive relationships with people. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm struggling here too. I miss in Tennessee. One of the things I really do miss about Tennessee is it being a red state. So I would have plenty of people who were different than me that I could chat with. But one of the things that I think you could do if you really want to try to have some conversations with folks who differ from you politically, or if you're older and you want to talk to a younger person, or younger and want to talk to an older person, or you're Jewish and you want to talk to someone Christian, is we have a wonderful program on Braver Angels where they'll match you up with someone anywhere in the country. It's probably going to be on Zoom, but it might be local. And it's called One-on-One Conversations. And if you go to the braverangels.org, that was in the chat, you'll find it. It's called One-on-One Conversations. And they will actually match you up with someone. And they had a wonderful program around the time of the 2024 election. I just moved here, and they wanted people to go to the polls and stand there. And they wanted a Republican and a Democrat to stand together. And I actually emailed them and said, you might have to find someone from New Hampshire to stand with me, right? Or from the Northeast Kingdom. But there was somebody in the Upper Valley who they found who agreed to do it with me. And she and I have become fast friends. We get together every so often and chat about issues that are political. And it's been a wonderful friendship. So as Doug said, people do exist. You just sometimes have to seek them out through schools, Rotary clubs, choruses, other things. And if you truly do get stuck, you can reach out to Braver Angels, the one-on-one conversations, or just our local Upper Valley Braver Angels group, where we're really trying to foster those kinds of conversations. When I was in Tennessee, I started a group, it's in the book, called Common Ground Nashville. And we met, in fact, I think some of the people on the chat who are from Tennessee will recognize this on the Zoom. We got together every month and we talked about an issue. We talked about guns. We talked about immigration. We talked about climate change, and it was really wonderful because we brought together conservatives and liberals, and there were more liberals than conservatives. But we had at one point right before COVID, 25% of our members were conservatives, or that came to that meeting, and that made me very, very happy because I felt like we could have those conversations.
And there's a New Hampshire group that's doing exactly that.
Yeah.
They're meeting on Zoom, and they pick a topic, and it's respectful conversation, differences of opinions. But if you want to check out something that would be really interesting, and you don't even really have to participate, you can just observe, is the National Braver Angels organization. And the Braver Angels is a membership organization you can join for $12, but the workshops are free. So the debates are really interesting. They have national debates, and they have a lot of people go on, and it's done in a way that is designed to be respectful. So you can just observe and watch.
And let me just say something. It's not like two people who are trying to bait each other. It's the people themselves who come to the debate. So it's you and me. And it's like a melting pot. So think of it like this. First, somebody speaks pro, and then somebody speaks con, the resolution. Let's say the resolution is, we should have open borders. So somebody would speak in favor, and then somebody would speak against. And because you're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, it's balanced. And there's a chance to speak, and there's a chance to ask questions of the speakers. And I always come away feeling like I've learned things. Although the secondary mission of Braver Angels is not just to make us more educated on these views, but to open our minds and our hearts and to say, oh, I never thought of it that way. That's such an interesting way to think about immigration or really any contentious issue.
And that's a group down at the St. Andrew's Church down in New London has been doing. They've got some in-person events.
Yeah.
They've had a lot of in-person events down there if you want to actually go to an in-person event. So, connect with Braver Angels, and there's ways that things are happening.
You can reach out to me or Doug. We have, our email is connect@beyondthepoliticsofcontempt.com. And
We're gonna have cards.
And we have cards for for those on
Oh,
the
that's
chat.
right, on the chat.
I wanted to say I've crashed the New Hampshire Alliance. I've done workshops.
The Alliance is like a chapter. That's the word's used,
yeah,
like a chapter.
Right, the chapter. And it's been really rewarding because I can join this even as a Vermonter. And I think even if you're outside of New Hampshire, they would welcome you. So if you need any more information on that, you can reach out to us. It is almost 7:30. Is there one or two more questions?
We have just a lengthy but a comment that I'll read. This is from Julian. She said, I was thinking about the earlier conversation when someone here mentioned the idea of speaking your mind. Speaking your mind, no matter how cruel, hateful, or disrespectful, is so often considered as an exercise of a right to freedom of speech. Sometimes it's difficult for us to be able to express ourselves without putting the focus on ourselves, our outrage or pain. One of the benefits of learning to express ourselves with curiosity is that we can ultimately get to model the kind of interaction that we would like to see from others around us. And admittedly, it's just plain hard, particularly when the person we might be interacting with us just isn't in a place right now to be able to have that kind of interaction with us. So we just have to wait and look for another opportunity. And that same person said, thanks, Beth, for suggesting the idea of curiosity. It's so powerful. And she asked, have any of you read Monica Guzman's book? I never thought of it that way. It's almost as good as your book.
Monica's a good friend of ours. She's
Yeah.
been to hand over.
Yeah.
Monica actually endorsed our book on the cover, so we were very touched by that. Yeah, I love Monica. Monica and I did a Substack together on the activism bridge building, and I've learned so much from her. That was a very powerful Substack for me. And what I did is I clipped our videos, and she talks about what it's like as a bridge builder to be more open to activists and what activists have to watch out for. And I really would recommend it. You had a question
Yes,
too.
so from the moment that I heard of it, I know that there was or has been a coalition of types in the New Hampshire legislature where people work together. And I know we're short on time, but if you could give some illustration of the way that, let's say, topics are set up to even begin. I know there's a lot of care done for the Braver Angels debates. The questions are very, very carefully set so that they're open. How do they do that? Is there an example that you know of on any issue?
Let me talk about the New Hampshire legislature, because I initiated that project in 2021. We've done 6 workshops with the New Hampshire legislature, and we now have a caucus. They call themselves the Granite Bridge Legislative Alliance, and myself and another former representative, Patricia Higgins, have worked with them. And we've really focused on it's a little different than say the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is trying to develop policies. We're just trying to develop relationships. Let's just get to know each other across the aisle. So this, we've done a series of workshops, but some of it is skill building. So we had workshops on skills for managing difficult conversations with colleagues, skills for managing difficult conversations with constituents. So some of this is just giving people skills about how they can manage these kind of difficult situations they find themselves in. The last one we did, and it's been a while now, but 100 reps came to our workshop at the it was in the House of Representatives, and it was the one Beth moderated the workshop, and I did
Co-moderated.
co-moderated.
With Paul Kansas.
I was sort of the wrap-up speaker, and I just said, maybe one thing we'd like you to think about, maybe how you relate to each other and how you engage with each other is more important than any legislation you're going to pass. Now, it's been a pretty contentious session down there this year. There's been some tough issues, but our caucuses work, and there are a lot of reasons for that, like we talked about with the conflict entrepreneurs and various factors. But we have people that are on the ground and trying to do better, and it's tough work, but people are trying, and it's an ongoing effort.
So there's some kind of support system for people who are still trying to use these skills?
Yeah, well, we work with this through this caucus, and then we offer workshops, and in some cases we've actually gone to the communities. We went to Brentwood. One of the reps asked us to come down to Brentwood, and it looked to me like a normal Braver Angels workshop. But afterwards, he said, there were people that showed up there that hadn't talked to each other in years. There's one community. And about 6 months later, there was a discussion in town. They were having, I guess it was the former town moderator was hosting a debate of different people who are running for office. And the moderator said, it seems like things have gotten a little better in Brentwood than they were before. And somebody stood up and said, well, we had that Braver Angel workshop.
Yeah.
It's on video. Why you gotta get a few cheers when you hear that kind of stuff.
And I have to brag, we actually have done one for the town managers as well, and select boards for New Hampshire and Vermont. And we've been, Braver Angels, we've been invited to speak to the Vermont town managers throughout the state at their national meeting. And I know one of my colleagues is meeting next week in the Vermont State House to work with the Vermont legislators. So what you started in New Hampshire has really taken off in other states as well.
So other states now?
Oh,
Yes, Vermont and Connecticut.
Well, we have the caucus.
Yeah, we have-
I don't know that
yeah.
they've quite got to the caucus level, but there are other reps that are interested. But of course, there's a lot of factors that are pushing them apart too. A lot of factors. So we're kind of, there's a tsunami out there and we're pushing against it as best we can, but this is challenging.
Well, why don't we take one more question?
and it's more a comment that
Yeah.
some of these issues and some of these challenges even rise among your friends that are like-minded.
Oh, yeah,
You know, the degree of anger that you really can't penetrate. And it makes it awkward to talk with people where you agree on every point of politics. And I can say that in the rallies too, that, I see signs that make me uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Yeah. Just the level of anger and contempt, and it's on our side, but where there's no disagreement about politics, really.
Right, I know what you're saying, and I think you might really enjoy that Monica Guzman Substack I referred to, because I felt that way too. And what I've learned is to be curious, even like sometimes I have to be as curious to people on the left as I do on the right.
Yeah.
Especially when I see some of those inflammatory signs at the rallies. I have a sign that I bring to the rallies that says, "I'm here because I love my country."
Yeah.
But I know other signs are not that tame. And I think where are people coming from, curiosity, really trying to listen and understand. And then you can share your perspective and say, my perspective is to maybe be less inflammatory.
I wonder whether it's an issue on both sides. In other words, that people that feel this level of aggression, it's harder to build bridges with on either side. I can think of Trumpies that are very gentle people that I've talked with mostly by asking questions rather than asserting opinions. But then I can think of other encounters I've had with people that I would really not want to hang around with.
Well, you have to pick and choose this is a lot of work, and you got to pick and choose when you think it's an opportunity. But I wanted to go back to your first point. I think it's really important to push back a little bit on your own side, because people are over here. And if you're not staying with me over here, if you want to move over here, it can feel pretty isolated, at least for the people on the extremes. Now, we talk about the book, the Hidden Tribes Report. They talk about the exhausted majority, and it's the people on the extremes that are driving the division. But the risk is if you don't hold the party line, you're gonna, and as a state legislator, you're gonna get a primary if you don't hold the party line. They're gonna come after you, and it's a little bit like that with how people feel about their politics. And so I think pushing back on your own side is done in a diplomatic way is really important.
Yeah, I want to say two things. First of all, Megan, can you put that last link in the chat if anybody's still here? I want to say two things. One is that building on and then we'll end it, building on what Doug just said, the extremes it's more in the media that there's more people on the extremes than there really are on the extremes. And there's an amazing study from the Hidden Tribes, the More Than Common group, that I recently became aware of that talks about, I'm going to put this in the chat. It talks about how we think there are more people who are against something than they really are. So the extremes, I think, are hyped up by social media, by the mainstream media. You're going to see the most inflammatory No King sign picked out, right, to go on the media, because as Doug says, if it screams, it streams. So you have to kind of be aware of that. And then, and I agree with, and I just want to say I agree with Doug about you have to push back sometimes on your own side. I would just say the place to start, and you said this, you need to be diplomatic. The place to start is to just start by asking questions, start by being curious, start by really trying to understand where someone's coming from when they're holding that particularly inflammatory sign. And then you can share with them, how you feel. And I think that holds for anyone. regardless. I mean, that's really what inclusion is, right? It's being inclusive of all beliefs and all life experiences and where people are from. And maybe that's a good place to end.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
and folks here, here's in the book or bookmarks,
Yeah.
and we'll stick around.
Yeah, I can't say enough about Megan and Mike. They have done an amazing job coordinating this hybrid event. And we're so glad that we're glad that you're all here in the room. We're so glad that so many people could join by the Zoom as well on this very rainy night that's trying really hard to be spring, but we're not there yet. Doing, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.